Hey there, I hope you're good, and welcome to Ask Daniel number 27, in which we are going to look at questions from 5 viewers. I think there are actually 2 or 3 that are established members of the community here, and 3 questions from new members. So, with that said, let's before we jump in here, actually. My usual disclaimer: nothing is specific medical advice to anyone, just general thoughts and comments that I hope will help anyone that's tuning in. And with that said, let us actually go to a follow-up question from Joseph. And Joseph asked the question of you. So this is Joseph's one of the follow-up questions here. He asked the question that I answered, I think, in the last episode. And here is a follow-up. So Joseph wrote 4 days ago, "Hi, Daniel. First of all, thank you for replying to my question. It definitely eased my mind what you said. I wanted to add that during the video, you asked why I was in this hyper-arousal state. Around this time last year, I got into a really bad car wreck. I wasn't injured, but I could have been seriously injured or worse. After the accident, truthfully, I started drinking daily because I couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened in that wreck. When I had my first panic attack in December, I had never had one before, so I thought I was having a heart attack. My cardiologist told me not to drink any coffee, no caffeine. I've stopped cold turkey since then." Basically, what I'm saying is, I think for that year of drinking to get my mind off the accident. Now, since I'm not drinking at all, I think that all the trauma is coming back with a vengeance. Finally, just a couple of quick questions. Is it normal for people like me to get dark circles around their eyes and neck pain? For example, the neck pain goes away when I'm doing something I enjoy. Hopefully you can get it back to me. But if writing is easier, but even writing this made me feel better. Well, I want to thank you, Joseph, for your initial question, this follow-up question too. This channel really could not, this would be totally boring and, have a much less meaning if it was just me talking. Questions are what gives this channel life for sure. So a couple of things that came to my mind as I was reading this. Number one was how there's a clear starting point in this case from where you got like hyper aroused. And for for anyone new to the channel, when I say hyper aroused, I just mean that you're in this kind of heightened state of heightened emotional state. That could be anxiety, stress. You could be excited or anxious or something like that. That's hype. All that is kind of the umbrella term for that is hyper arousal. Now, I find this a good time to kind of talk about the second arrow, which is this ancient Buddhist philosophy that I think is so insightful and helpful. And it goes something like this: that there's this first arrow, which are things that happen to us that we cannot predict or prevent, and then there's the second arrow, which is our reaction to that thing. The example that for some reason I've come to use all the time here is you are served some coffee, you drink it, you burn yourself on the coffee, and then you curse the barista who served you that coffee. Now, you've been hit by 2 arrows. First, you burnt yourself on the coffee. That was unavoidable. You couldn't foresee that. It just happened. But then you were hit by a second arrow, which was when you got really upset and started cursing at this person. And the second arrow is worse than the first one. That's kind of the ancient philosophy, which is so helpful. So, bringing that to this scenario that Joseph shares with us, the car wreck in this case is the first arrow. It is the thing that we cannot prevent. It is circumstance. It's something we can't do anything about. It's something that happened in the past. That's the first arrow. And then we have the second arrow, which is everything that is the reaction to that, which is the panic attacks, the anxiety, the fear, the insomnia that followed. And, although you can't do anything about the first arrow, you can work on your reaction to it, And in the specific example of insomnia, that work is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. But I believe that there's similar, you can do CBT for anxiety, CBT for depression, all kinds of things. You can really work on that in all aspects of that reaction. And by the way, for anyone out there, I believe that what's her name? I'm blanking out on the name for a second here, but the life coach school, if you check out that podcast, that goes over kind of the model that can be applied to every single type of problem out there, including anxiety, depression, what have you. So for anyone out there that has anything but insomnia, I highly recommend checking out the Life Coach School podcast. Now, another thing that I want to bring up there is you thought Joseph had a panic attack. I thought it was a heart attack. Cardiologist said don't drink coffee, which I think is a common kind of recommendation. And you should, everyone out there, listen to your doctor, of course. But generally speaking, I find that whenever we do things to kind of avoid a negative, it kind of makes it stronger. If we bring the same example to insomnia, if you're having trouble sleeping and somebody tells you stop drinking coffee, then the reason you stop drinking coffee is that you want to escape insomnia, you want to escape sleeplessness. But in reality, what happens is that when you're trying to avoid something, when you're unwilling to experience something, that just makes that thing stronger, because you're training your brain that it's dangerous. Insomnia is dangerous. We want to avoid it. So by trying to avoid insomnia, you actually make it stronger. And I think that actually does apply to so many other things like panic attacks, anxiety, etc. Everything we do to avoid a negative makes that negative stronger, So that's something I just thought about as I was reading this. Now, the drinking, I think again, it's the same thing. Intention is everything. If you enjoy alcohol, you have a glass of wine with dinner, it's totally fine. It's a positive, if you're drinking alcohol to avoid pain, to avoid anxiety, to avoid insomnia, to avoid depression, that is not good. That makes everything you're trying to avoid stronger. You're training your brain that you can't have that. You have to avoid it. You drink to avoid it. It becomes stronger. And now coming on, stop drinking. Again, I think if you're drinking for that reason, to avoid some trauma or avoid, thinking about a trauma, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And yes, can that kind of something's kind of resurface or whatnot? Maybe, but now you're not avoiding it anymore. I think in the long term, that is so much better, so much better. So now to the actual questions here. Dark circles. Is it normal for people like me to get dark circles around their eyes and neck pain? I want to say the question about the eyes, dark circle around their eyes, I get a lot, and I've actually never come across any studies that shows that is caused by sleeplessness. We always associate it with that. So I think it's uncertain. I think nobody really knows. And personally, I think the most important thing is, I think how well we sleep and how rested we feel, etc., like that are super important. Just asking yourself, how do I feel? But I think any surrogate marker, like eyes, circles under the eyes, or checking how much time you slept, or your Fitbit tracker, or how many hours you slept, things like that are not helpful. They lead you in the wrong direction. Because let's say you choose dark circles under your eyes to tell how well you slept, then that leads to kind of you become more, it draws attention to your trouble sleeping, because if you hypothetically say every morning you go look at yourself in the mirror and then you're like, oh my gosh, the circles are actually bigger now. I have to do something else. I have to go to bed earlier. I have to try a sleep mask. Oh no, that didn't help. They're still there. You see how this is a rabbit hole. It's the same type of rabbit hole, checking, how much you slept using a tracker, So I think the best approach is to say it's not really known why we have dark circles under our eyes. And using it as a kind of quality of sleep marker is not helpful. It's better to just abandon that as a marker and just go by how you feel and how you sleep. Neck pain, I want to say, going back to hyperarousal, hyperarousal amplifies every single thing we feel. Meaning, if you normally have this kind of twitching in your arm, that you wouldn't even notice it. You wouldn't think about it. It just passes unnoticed. But when you're hyper aroused, you notice everything. You notice that twitch in your arm. You notice that neck pain. You notice that tension in stomach. And so I think the important point here is that neck pain or any pain is sort of amplified by hyperarousal. And actually, there's such a huge clue here. The neck pain goes away when I'm doing something I enjoy. When you enjoy, you're distracted. You don't have that hyperarousal actually. Then the neck pain goes away. But when you're not doing anything that's very engaging, you again kind of the hyperarousal builds and you feel all the pain, etc. So that I think that's a huge clue right there. And now, lastly, here, a lot of people that hear this might think, so how do I get rid of hyperarousal? How do I feel less hyperaroused? Well, as I say so often on this channel, anything that you do with a specific intent of becoming less hyperaroused is going to backfire. If you go start meditation and, with the aim of like, I'm meditating now so I can become less hyperaroused, that actually just brings attention to it. It's the same thing as trying to escape pain by drinking alcohol or avoiding coffee, or anything you do to try to avoid a negative amplifies it. So you can't do anything with the direct intent of becoming less hyperaroused. Which actually, if you go back to last week, Insomnia Inside, I don't know, not 298, I think it was, which was a success story from Heather. For her, understanding this was really crucial. So anyway, that's that. So what should you do? I think, going towards the light is always the answer. Like doing things that by themselves are meaningful and joyful, purposeful, makes you happy. If you go towards that direction, I think you kind of forget about, things that were holding you back, etc. I think that's always the right path. So, Joseph, thanks so much for sharing this. It was super helpful. It's really, really helpful for the channel. So thank you, and stay in touch. Let us know if you have any follow-up questions. So with that said, we're going to move from a Joseph question and over to another. I believe this is a follow-up question. No, it's not a follow-up question. It's actually a question from a new member of the community here, which is Matt. And he wrote the following 2 days ago. Hi, Daniel. I appreciate your videos. It's nice to get such long videos on improving sleep anytime. I'm so grateful for this question. My insomnia started back in August of 2019 during a stressful period and has been going on since then. I actually had chronic insomnia in the past and managed to fix it with the help of bedtime restriction. Obviously, when this new episode occurred, I started back with bedtime restriction, and it works to a degree, but I'm having a challenging time trying to get back to my normal sleep. I know based on my sleep in the past, after I fixed it the first time, I average about 6.5 hours of sleep. What seems to happen now is I will set my sleep window at 6 hours. So for those of you new to the channel, when you have trouble sleeping, you can use what's called a sleep window, which is you decide to spend, for example, 6 hours in bed, and you get up at 6. You don't go to bed before 12. And there are many reasons to do that, but I think we'll get to that in this episode, but that is a sleep window. So Matt has set that to 6 hours, and then I begin to gradually become more consistent, add time, and go for about 2 weeks like that, and then it devolves back to my chronic insomnia. Okay, so let me read that one more time. What seems to happen now is I will set my sleep window at 6 hours and then begin to gradually become more consistent, add time, okay, and go for 2 weeks like that, and then it will devolve. So I think what Matt's saying here is that he starts at 6 hours, and then he's doing better, and then he says, like, now I'm going to go to 7 hours and maybe 7.5 or something, and then he goes back to having insomnia. Like, here's an example from my sleep blog. And he says, so let's go over this together. So first it says, so I think slept from 1:05 a.m. to 5:30 and up for 10 minutes, and then up at 6:45 a.m. Next night, went to bed like 12:50, woke up 5:30, up for 10 minutes, and then till 6:45 a.m. And then next one was 1:05 a.m. until 7 a.m. Did not wake up. And then the two next nights slept like about 7 hours without waking up. Then a night where he slept from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. with multiple waking ups. Let's just kind of jump ahead here. So the second week seems to be more wake ups, and then the third week it says here sleep devolves. Okay, went to bed like 1:50 a.m. up 7:10, up for 30 to 40 minutes, back to sleep later at maybe 7:50 till alarm at 8:10. Felt weird during the day, but not horrible. Next night 1:50-ish to 7:35, no wakes but feeling foggy, and then 1:50 a.m. to 6. I slept 4 hours, felt bad during the day. Now, as you can see, there are 3 days in a row at the end which are less than the previous 2 weeks. This pattern has happened previously. It's like I just stopped generating sleep after 2 weeks. My guess is that I don't have enough sleep that I've built up, question mark. Curious if you have any insight based on your experience of seeing recovery from insomnia. I'm not going into these nights anxious. I just couldn't generate enough sleep. I do remember in the past having to deprive myself of sleep quite a bit to get back to normal sleep. During the stretch, I was going to sleep, but not exactly when I was super tired. In the past, I've done a technique where I will wait until I'm really tired, essentially passing out before I sleep, and my quality seems to be better. However, it still has to be within a sleep window, or it also devolves. So I'm thinking I will do a technique and go more like 2 weeks of 6 hours before I had time. What would be a sign to add more? It seems I get to the foothold stage, but have trouble getting to the end. Sorry, this is a bit long when this insomnia really is making my life more difficult, and I most likely will be working night shift as a new grad nurse, so I'm going to need my sleep. Thanks for your help. Okay, so Matt, again, thank you so much for submitting this. And I often try to like go over some positives, encouraging things, which is maybe you've had insomnia before, but it sounds like, we really hear my insomnia started in August of 2019, which is, a couple of months ago, which is, puts you in a much better spot than somebody who's had trouble sleeping for 10 years, and I say that because if somebody has had trouble sleeping for decades, these belief systems are so ingrained, and they've tried so many things. There's almost like they've invested in their insomnia. It's almost like, if just the thought of I could be sleeping good in 4 weeks is almost like, well, then why did I do this for 10 years? And identity too. You can feel like insomnia is part of who you are. So I'm just bringing that up to say that that's a positive. You've had success in the past with bedtime restriction. That's a positive. And there are, even in the last few weeks here, times when you sleep, a good solid chunk of time. So all those are positive. So I think I'm just, convinced that things that should make you optimistic. Being optimistic and positive always helps. So that said, let me just share kind of my big picture, overall reaction when I read this. So the first thing I'm reading is this is somebody who's serious, determined, has a plan, which is amazing. That's awesome. Now it's the first, I usually say, or often say that I consider cognitive behavioral therapy and insomnia to be a kind of two-step process, if you will. The first one is just understanding sleep and understanding insomnia, why you have it, what's going on, etc. That's super important. That's the kind of educational part where you really learn, and that I think should be a pretty brief period, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, something like that. That's when you ask all your questions, you research and you understand it, and that's when you also set it, you start spending less time in bed. The second portion, which may take a little longer time and often is harder, is the forget it. So set it and forget it. First part, set it. You set a sleep window, forget it. You try to shift your attention away from sleep, spend less and less time reading about it, researching it, etc. So my kind of big picture thing is you got the set it part down, which I think can be improved exactly as you yourself suggested, but you get the set it down part. I think the forget it part is really what to work on here. Meaning I see a lot I went to bed 1:05, a lot of tension to 6:65. This happened. I woke up so many times. I think, which is completely natural. When you have a problem, you want to kind of get a hold of it. But insomnia is one of those things that the more you try to kind of get a grip on it, the more it slips through your fingers, So the forget it part is, I think, really is about trying, maybe keeping a sleep diary, I think, is good, but make it more subjective, about what time did I go to bed, and what time did I get up. The getting up part, I think, is good to actually have an alarm and get up pretty rigorously the same time every morning. But the bedtime part, not knowing what time it is great. And I guess what I'm just trying to convey here is that the second part, I think, is super important, where you try to shift attention away from sleep, actually. But that said, let's go over some things that I think could really work in your favor. Number one was this one. So I'm thinking of going more 2 weeks of 6 hours before I had time. I really think you're on something big here. And I don't think actually it has to be 6 hours. It could be maybe a little bit more generous, 6.5, maybe even 7 hours, but not changing it in more than 2 weeks, I think is brilliant. I think that's totally very, very good, because that also serves the forget it part. So if you say, like, you decide I'm going to do a 6.5 hour sleep window for 2 weeks, then at least for those 2 weeks, you don't question it. You just get up at the same time every morning, spend 6.5 hours in bed, and you just kind of, apart from that, you just like do things you enjoy, talk to people, have a good life, blah, blah, blah. And that's going to really, really help you, I believe. Totally. The big one. Number two, what would be a sign to add more time? I think if you do, let's say 2 weeks of a 6 hour or 6.5 hour sleep window, and you find that you overall are doing pretty good, and most importantly, if you feel like your sleep confidence is growing, if you feel like, you know what, there's actually nothing wrong with me, sleep is pretty predictable, I'm doing good, I can sleep, etc., I think then is a good time to expand that sleep window. Now, how do you do that? I think this is a great way. Let's say you decide to do a 6.5 hour sleep window. You're getting up 6 every morning. You're going to bed not before 11:30 p.m., right? Then you decide, okay, now I'm going to stop checking the time at 10:30 p.m. and then just go by how you feel. You've expanded your sleep window, but you don't have this kind of fixed, you're not waiting for 11:30 to happen. You just like 10:30, you stop checking the time, then you don't check it all night, and you just go by how you feel. If you feel sleepy, pretty soon after 10:30, you go to bed. If you don't, you do something you enjoy, etc. I think that's a perfect way to segue out of having any rules and regulations. Finally here, what actually caught my mind the most in this email was the end. I'll be working night shift as a grad nurse, so I'm going to need my sleep. That was a red flag for me. That was a big red flag for me. And I say that because, knowing that you're not sleeping well can motivate you to do stuff. And I'm super happy that you've come across bedtime restriction CBTi, totally. But what really drives insomnia is the desire to sleep, the fear of losing sleep. So kind of like, I'm going to need my sleep, that can really work against you. I so often are in these conversations with people where I'm like, try to find evidence that sleep is not that important. Find evidence that you can do well on little sleep. Find evidence that even if you sleep good, sometimes you have a not so good day. The more you believe that sleep isn't really that important, the better you will sleep, for sure. So that's a big one. Night shift, it's going to be a challenge, but what can you do? You need to do that, and maybe it'll work out to your favor. Maybe you'll kind of disrupt things, and you'll find yourself in a new pattern where you're sleeping good or whatnot. But anyway, Matt, thanks so much for this question. And if you have any follow-up questions, please submit those. Absolutely. And with that said, I actually don't want to miss a chance to talk about a question from Ed. And before I actually read this question, I want to say, Ed, that what struck me as I read your question here is that it was so classic. Actually, when you're somebody like myself who helps people with insomnia all the time, you're never actually surprised. You've heard the stories, all variations of the story all the time. There's never any surprises. But this question from Ed was so classic. So many things that you hear all the time. And now I'm not saying this to kind of belittle or trivialize this message from Ed that we're going to read in a second, but because knowing that that your question kind of is so classic, that should give you so much optimism, because that means that for sure, if you have a classic problem, then the classic solution, CBTi, will work for sure. And so I kind of just want to open with that, because that has been on my mind for a few days now. All right, so let's read this. Hi, Daniel. Wondering if I could run my scenario by you and pose you a couple of questions. I've been struggling with sleep for many years, but it got much worse after a health scare last winter, which has turned into an anxiety disorder. I've tried CBTi before, but if I'm honest, I never really committed to it. I was calling 7 hours in bed sleep restriction when I knew it wasn't, and was not getting out of bed. Since Saturday night, I have cut back to going to bed 12:30 and setting my alarm for 6:30. And I find I'm not quite anxious when I get into bed, and I'm finding it hard not to fret about sleep during the day. Before bed, I take 75 milligrams of trazodone and 5 milligrams of Ambien. I'm not thrilled about this, especially the Ambien, but anxiety keeps getting the better of me, and I take it. My psychologist, who has some experience in CBTi, he did it on himself, says I should keep taking it until I get sleep somewhat regularly. I'm usually falling asleep within about 20 minutes, but most mornings I am still waking around 4:30, and the first thought I have is, oh my God, I'm awake. What if I can't get back to sleep? How will I survive tomorrow? I then become frustrated with myself for having these thoughts, and the rest is history. I'm going out and doing everything I normally do in the day, although I feel pretty crappy. To be honest, I'm very scared that this approach won't work for me, and I won't know where to go next. I'm not sure if I have a specific question besides how to avoid waking super early and how to get back to sleep if I do. And then, actually, just so I don't forget to comment on that. I think the reason I did this kind of like intro little thing before reading from Ed was I read this. I'm very scared that this approach won't work for me, and everything in this message tells me it's gonna work for you. It's totally gonna work for you, and by the way, I know I see this a lot too, but I truly believe that CBTi, at least if it's good CBTi, is just like weight loss. Like if you exercise some more and eat less calories, you are going to lose weight. 100% sure. Same thing with CBTi. If you spend less time in bed, but even more importantly, if you can kind of like turn your attention away from sleep, if you do that, you're going to sleep better. 100%. Now, just to add a little more detail, it seems like one night it will work well where I fall asleep pretty easy when I go to bed at midnight. And by some miracle, I sleep right through my alarm at 6 a.m. Last night was another night where I woke up and I would guess it was about 5 a.m. I couldn't get back to sleep. Full disclosure, I stayed in bed and tossed and turned until 6:30. I then helped my kids get breakfast and went back to bed at 7 to try and sleep some more, but was unsuccessful. I have so much anxiety around sleep now that it is keeping me awake. My fear is that CBTi won't work for me. Now that I read back over this, it seems pretty clear to me. I have to get out of bed when I can't get back to sleep, and I have to not go back and try to force sleep. It's just so hard to do. I can feel really drowsy on the couch, but I feel panicked and awake the minute I lay down in bed. There's we can spend a lot of time on this, and I actually do want to spend quite a bit of time on this message and go over some things in detail. First of all, I think you're 100% onto it. I think if there was like this one thing that I would like really prioritize for someone like Ed, it would be respect the wake up time in the morning. Don't go back to bed. For two reasons. One is that the reason we have insomnia is the fear of losing sleep, and if you continue to if you wake up in the morning, I didn't sleep at all, I gotta get that sleep, and then you sleep some more, it just reinforces that belief that you have to get sleep. It trains your brain that you cannot go without sleep. You have to get it any way you can, number one. Number two, if you don't have a consistent kind of time out of bed, it really disrupts your circadian rhythms. I often talk about the 18-hour rule. Let's call it the 17-hour rule, actually. Let's say somebody needs 7 hours of sleep. That means that they're 24 hours in the day and night, right? 24 minus 7 is 17. That means they need 17 hours of wakefulness to be ready to sleep, which means if they get up at 7 a.m., they're going to be ready for sleep 17 hours later, which is midnight, right? But if that person gets out of bed, let's say 9 a.m., they're not going to be ready for sleep until 2 a.m., etc. So you see how that wake up time is so important. Now, let's go over this kind of one by one things here, and we're really going to go over some kind of classic good advice here. Now, number one, I've been struggling with sleep for many years, but it got much worse after health scare. That is, so common. That and that goes back to the 3P model, which very briefly is it's the model that explains insomnia. And the first P is predisposition. If you are kind of health conscious, you're a type A personality, you're maybe a perfectionist, you're kind of a little bit over analyzer, that type of personality predisposes you towards insomnia. And that's why often people with insomnia say I was never really a good sleeper. I had a tendency towards not sleeping well. That's kind of that personality of being a very active thinker, being kind of a little bit high, energetic person, that that often makes you sleep not fantastic, but often you're doing okay, no pretty good problem. Then there's a health scare, a trigger, something happens. That's the second P. That's the precipitating factor. Something kind of triggers more full-blown insomnia, which is normal. Like when something stressful happens, it's normal that we don't sleep good. So the first and second P are actually no problems. They just kind of help explain. The third P is like the perpetuating factor. That's the really important one. That's when you identify insomnia as a problem, start like trying to do things to make you sleep more, think about sleep, trying to figure it out, pay more attention to sleep, etc. And then the more you try to sleep, the less sleep you get, then the more worried you become, then the more you try, etc., etc. That's the 3P model, which explains why you have chronic insomnia. And it fits so well on your message here added. I tried it before, CBTi before, but it wasn't really committed to it. Totally get it. And I was calling 7 hours in bed sleep restriction when I knew it wasn't. Now, here's the thing. I think spending 7 hours in bed may actually work well, as long as you respect the wake up time, in the morning. And I think, a lot of people think of CBTi as like you have to really be kind of like to do extreme bedtime restriction, like 5 hours in bed, 5.5 hours. I don't think that's so important. The most important, that I believe the most important is that you respect your wake up time, get out of bed time, and look at the bedtime restriction more as a way of like focusing less on sleep, trying less to sleep, spending less time trying to sleep, more than kind of the extreme, short time in bed to really like build a super strong sleep drive. I think the more important thing is being consistent and looking at less time in bed as a way of trying less to sleep, Now, I find I'm not quite anxious when I go to bed, and I find it harder not to fret about sleep during the day. Totally see that one. Now, okay, the medication, yes. We have this conflict, which is common. Somebody who's like, doesn't want to take medications, but then just feels like, I just can't handle it, I gotta take it, which is like the worst, the worst scenario in reality, because it kind of continues to reinforce the fact that you can't sleep on your own, because you're trying to sleep, but then you give in and take the medication. And then that just feeds this notion that, if I hadn't taken the medication, then I wouldn't have fallen asleep at all. I really need it. I'm dependent on it, etc. So I recently, I don't know if I talked about this here, but I wrote this blog post where I talked about how it's so important to make medications a non-factor when you're trying to, get past your insomnia. And there are 2 ways of doing that. I think for someone like yourself, Ed, it makes perfect sense to do what your therapist says, which is take the medications, but make it a non-factor, meaning you take the same medication, the same time every night, and then that's it. Like, that's it for now. At some future point, you can come off them, but for now, just take the same dose, same time every night. Because guess what? If you sleep well, or if you don't sleep well, it has nothing to do with the medication, because that's now a non-factor, because you're taking it without considering anything. And then you also get away from this whole like, should I take it? Should I not take it? Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should take it later, etc. So that is a good one. Now, this one. I'm usually falling asleep within 20 minutes, but most mornings I'm still waking up at around 4:30. And right there, I'm thinking, how do you know it's 4:30, right? Because you check the time. You purposely check the time, or you kind of like, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to check the time, but I kind of just happen to see it. Well, either way, just knowing the time is so stressful, because you start calculating how long you've been in bed, how long you slept, how much you have time, like all that calculating is so anxiety provoking, So stop checking the time, another important one. And then, yeah, exactly. As Ed says here, what if I can't get sleep? How will I survive tomorrow? So all those questions happen when you know what time it is. So that is an important one, not to check the time. And then I'm very scared. I think I felt there was one more thing, but I think not. So I think basically, I think there are so many reasons. I mean, there's so many things you can do that individually are all really helpful. Take all the medication at the same time. Stop checking the time. Get out of bed in the morning, and just be patient, keep going, and you will do well. You will do amazingly well, Ed. Absolutely. Okay, stay in touch. Let us know how things go. And that said, Vector333 has a live question here. Has insomnia been known to occur in cycles more generally? When I get insomnia, I found that it typically lasts 3 or 4 nights, and then I will sleep well for several nights before the cycle repeats. Yeah, I can't say I can't quote any studies, but I can definitely say from my personal experience that this is not uncommon at all. There are all very many different types of patterns. I just today I had a patient who was like sleeps like very little for 2 days and then like sleeps a lot the third day. Some people have every other day. Some people go like definitely many patterns. I've heard similar patterns to the one you described a lot, and I think when it's like this, like you go several nights and then you have like 3 or 4 nights of little sleep, it's probably mostly a break problem, kind of a hyperarousal problem, that you have a night where you sleep little and then you identify that and then you kind of wonder how you're going to sleep the following night, and then you sleep worse the following night, and you sleep really bad for a third night, and then sleep drive accumulates. You haven't slept much for 3 nights, and then you're actually really sleepy, and then that sleepiness kind of overpowers the hyperarousal that's built up, and then you sleep well, and then you stop worrying about your sleep again, and you sleep good for a couple of nights. So I think that cycle is not unusual. I think the key to getting past it is pretty much educational. Like I think if you have kind of sporadic insomnia and like 3 nights here and there, I think the key to it is like just knowing that when you have that initial night when you don't sleep very much, trying to not pay much attention to it. Try to just get up at the same time every morning, have a good day, enjoy your day, and just like try as much as possible not to try to prevent it from happening again or kind of overanalyze it or think too much about it. And I think you'll go back into your normal schedule quicker. That's kind of my spontaneous take on that one. So Vector, thanks for that live question. And with that said, we have 2 more questions here. I think we'll get to both of them. 9 hours ago, actually. No. What's this then? Okay, so this is from Audrey. And they came in 11 hours ago, and she said the following. I watched a lot of your videos on YouTube. I've also emailed you before. Yes, that was in September, yeah. I came across a video where you stated that insomnia is anxiety-based only, not hormonal. For me, I started not sleeping after pregnancy, and everything else was off with my hormones. I got my hormones tested, and they were very imbalanced. That being said, I've also experienced many nights of restless insomnia with no anxiety at all. Regardless, I believe CBT to be an effective treatment, but I don't think in every case it's just anxiety thoughts. And I do have some thoughts on that. And but there was kind of a follow-up to that from Audrey. She said, regarding the question, I think for me at least, the anxiety was hormone-based. So fixing the hormone problem can cure the anxiety, thus the insomnia. Not a lot of women experience postpartum anxiety, which is hormone-based and can lead to insomnia. For me, getting my hormones back on track was necessary in order to get the anxiety under control in order to be able to sleep. Not sure that makes sense. I just want to elaborate on this a little bit. I watch your channel. I think it's wonderful research, but also want to shed some light on the fact that for some people, hormonal shifts and imbalances are what causes their anxiety, which then leads to insomnia. So my opinion is that the hormones being balanced is essential. I did do the CBTi for a short period of time and saw results. Unfortunately, my baby was waking up frequently and feeding, so I had to wait. Now that my baby's sleeping through the night, I'll be implementing some CBTi rules. I hope to see this discussed tonight. Yeah, first of all, actually, Audrey, well done. Like, you actually didn't just kind of listen to what I say here on the channel. You actually implemented it and you saw results. That's amazing. That's awesome. And if you do it again and you're just patient and keep going with it, you will see results again. You'll do amazing. No questions about that. Now, the hormones. Here are my thoughts on this. I'm going to answer from an insomnia perspective, and I honestly believe what I'm going to say applies to anxiety too, but I don't know that because I'm not an anxiety expert. But from an insomnia perspective, I want to say this. Hormones can absolutely affect your sleep. If you are very, very stressed, for example, and your stress hormones are elevated, then that will make it harder for you to sleep. Now, as I'm saying that, I want to clarify that when we are stressed, It is that, we something from externally is affecting us, and then we are stressed, which includes our hormones increasing, and then that makes it hard for us to sleep, as opposed to, our cortisol levels just randomly going up, and then we feel stressed, which I don't believe that happens. But that said, my point here is that, for example, after menopause, you have, very much hormonal imbalances, right? Which causes these hot flashes and affects your mood and everything, right? And in menopause, insomnia is very, very frequent, So there's no question in my mind that hormonal imbalances can cause disrupted sleep, can affect your sleep, which is very different from chronic insomnia. If you have hot flashes, for example, they can definitely disrupt your sleep. But guess what? If there's no particular strong reaction to them, then it just becomes a nuisance. It becomes like, this hot flash wakes me up. Oh my God, it's so hot. I have to take all the sheets off, change the blanket and change, my shirt. Okay, now I feel a little better. Go back to sleep. Happens again. It's annoying. It's crazily annoying, probably. I'm sure it is. But it's different from chronic insomnia, which is when it feels like the insomnia has taken a life of its own. When it's like the hot flash is waking up, but then you're totally panicked. It's 3 a.m. You can't sleep. You wonder what to do. You go out in the bedroom. You do this. You try some melatonin. You put a sleep mask on. It's like 2 hours later. That's different, So my point here is that I definitely think hormones can cause sleep disruption, but they do not cause chronic insomnia. And the point here is that there are 1.5 million things that can cause that sleep disruption. That could be acute pain. It could be a stress related to work. It could be having a kid that wakes up all the time, regardless of hormones. It could be almost anything can disrupt your sleep, but only one thing can cause that chronic, just unending, relentless insomnia. That is the reaction to the sleep disturbance. Only our anxiety, yes, but more specifically, only our preoccupation, worry, habit changes, belief systems, etc., can cause that chronic insomnia. That is my belief, which then takes me to I think again, when you look at studies on that, menopause, when you compare hormone replacement therapy versus cognitive behavioral therapy, the CBTi is much more effective than hormone replacement therapy. So even though the hot flashes go away when you replace hormones, it doesn't actually end insomnia, which then is proof that it's more the thought pattern, the beliefs that kind of drive insomnia long term. So I hope that helps, Audrey. And if you have any follow-up questions, please let me know. Oh yeah. I want to add one more thing here. I want to add one more thing that I think is important that I thought about. I was driving home from work today, which was this, that nobody really knows. I have my beliefs, and you have beliefs, and we all have beliefs, right? As far as how do hormonal imbalances affect our sleep, and can they cause insomnia, right? But I think what is most important here is actually this, that if we are looking for truth, what is the absolute truth here? Well, we're never going to find it. There aren't studies that are huge, long-term randomized studies that answer a question. So the truth none of us will know what the truth is. So the important thing, I believe, is to choose the truth that works for you. Meaning, if you have if you believe that an underlying hormonal imbalance is what's causing your insomnia, how does that belief system work for you? Does it take you in the right direction or the wrong direction? Versus a belief, a truth that it is mostly kind of my reaction and my behavior, my habits that is driving my insomnia. In which direction does that take you? Choose the truth that serves you best, because the real truth is elusive. It's nowhere to be found. I'm happy I remember that. One, because I felt that was an important one. Okay, last question for tonight is from Jade. And she actually literally emailed 4 minutes ago with a little addition here. All right, so let's read these questions from Jade, which will be our last set of questions here. Hi, Daniel. Hope all is well with you. I've not been able to sleep for the past 3 weeks and have been having night sweats, and it is very stressful. I feel very concerned because now I have headaches and I'm super stressed out. Just to give you a background, I have anxiety and acid reflux. Please let me know what you think. I need all the help I can get. By the way, the title is Sporadic Fatal Insomnia. So then there was this follow-up here, which was kind of clarification. I think here it says, I would like just to add that I'm also having symptoms of like being in heat and then going into cold. I have OCD as well, and it is regarding my health, and I'm 21. I feel like I'm always so focused on health. I feel like my brain can't handle all this lack of sleep. But I'm having dreams, but they're vivid. So if you could discuss this tonight, that would be great. Absolutely. So first of all, for anyone that is concerned about your health, please talk to your doctor, right? But if we look at Jade's questions here as a, for anyone, what is my belief is the right approach for anyone that has the symptoms that Jade describes here, then I would say the following. If anyone has had problems sleeping for 3 weeks, we call that acute insomnia. I don't know if this is super helpful to have these cutoffs about, less than 3 months is like acute insomnia, and, chronic insomnia is more than 3 months. And why do I feel that's important? Well, I feel like it is so important at this early stage to actually kind of get in early and prevent yourself from having chronic insomnia. And we talked a little bit about this earlier when I went over this 3P model, when I replied to Ed, that the third P is the really important one. That's the perpetuating factors. And that is when someone goes, oh my gosh, I have insomnia, I can't sleep, this is a problem, I got to do something about it. And this person then goes, I'm going to start by taking some melatonin. No, that didn't help. Something's really wrong with me. I'm going to start, keeping my bedroom really dark. That didn't help either. Something must really be wrong with me. And then tries more things, becomes more worried, sleeps less, tries more things, becomes even more worried, et cetera, et cetera. That's chronic insomnia. So whenever I see an email from somebody that's had trouble sleeping for a couple of weeks or so, I'm like, the most important thing, prevent yourself from having chronic insomnia by like really reacting to your trouble sleeping, So that's kind of number one. Number two, these fatal insomnias, are, as you know, super, super rare. But more importantly, if you read about sporadic fatal insomnia, the few case reports that are out there, there's actually, it's never described as an insomnia. Meaning insomnia means somebody's struggling to sleep, like I can't sleep, I'm waking up all the time. It's described as a neurological condition, where people have like these neurological symptoms, problems with balance or gait or coordination or speech, things like that are obvious to other people, and then also start sleeping less, kind of objectively just sleeping less. So I always feel like when somebody's worried about their sleep, that in itself is very reassuring, because people with neurological conditions where they simply have this objective lessening in sleep are not described as having any worries about their sleep. So that I want to add that one. Night sweats, often very unspecific. Again, it's like talk to your doctor, but when it comes to just for me as a sleep doctor, they're unspecific. They don't mean anything in particular. And definitely a lot of people with anxiety have night sweats. That's very true. I feel very concerned. I have headaches and I'm super stressed out. As we talked about with, who was that? I forget the name. Maybe it was Matt or maybe Joseph, but who said, I think it was Joseph who said he had like a lot of neck pain and, hyperarousal. That's when we're kind of anxious or hyperaroused, stressed, etc. That can just amplify everything we feel, including like headaches. So if you have like this, if you normally would have this light headache, and you're not very hyper aroused, you just like maybe not paying much attention, but when you're hyper aroused, it can just really amplify it. That's something I would definitely think about. And then going to this last part here, I'm having symptoms of being hot and then going to cold, unspecific. I don't know what to really make of that, except again, hyper arousal can cause all kinds of things. I have OCD regarding my health. I'm so focused on my health. That is a huge insight, particularly when it comes to insomnia. It's you know, as I talked to about earlier there, like one of the real risk factors is being health conscious. Taking care of one's health is, generally speaking, a great thing. But when it comes to insomnia like loves attention. The more we focus on insomnia, the more the stronger it gets, you know. Because sleep is it's like a passive process. When we're not trying to sleep, when we're not exerting any effort, when we're not thinking about sleep, we sleep great. But when we start paying attention, focusing, thinking about it, that's when we have insomnia. I feel like my brain can handle this lack of sleep. You know, the body's kind of a perfect system in a way, you know. Like if you go for a really long stretch without sleep, it will, like that sleep drive, the need for sleep becomes so strong that it compensates, you know. So I often use this analogy that I learned from Martin Reed, which is like you can hold your breath for so long, but you can't hold your breath long enough that it will hurt your body. Same thing with sleep. Like you can go so long without sleeping, but not it can never hurt you. You know, your body often, you know, produces sleep if you've gone too long without sleep. I'm having dreams that are vivid. That is very common with anxiety. You know, you get superficial sleep, you remember dreams more, you have fragment sleep, etc. So I think, you know, for anyone that has trouble sleeping, I think the most important, particularly if things are like trouble sleeping is new, you know, then I think the key, like, is super important not reacting to it. That's important for everyone, but particularly if it's new, just like go back to what you did 4 weeks ago, like do the same things in terms of like when you went to bed, get out of bed, don't try to force sleep, kind of just move it, just kind of like try, if it's possible to just forget about the whole thing, that's amazing. If that doesn't come easy to you, I would say it's always good to just get up at the same time every morning and don't spend too much time in bed. Those are kind of like some general tips that I think are helpful for everyone. All right, that said, let's conclude here. I hope this is helpful to anyone out there. What else? I want to share that I'm working on this book, and I'm starting to put it together. Maybe in a couple of months it'll be done. And the selling point for this book is going to not that it's the best book ever written on sleep. You know, there are other good books. There's going to be a good one. There's not the best one. It's not going to be that it's like well illustrated and an easy, nice read. No, the selling point is going to be that I'm going to put my cell phone there. I'm going to put an email there, so anyone that reads it and has a question can just reach right out to me, and I might just text back, or if it's more complicated, I might answer here on the channel, but I just want to share that. All right, so that said, hope you have a really good rest of your day or night, and I'll be back here tomorrow. I'm planning actually to think about, I'm going to talk tomorrow about like how it's so important not to believe that insomnia has a life of its own. But anyway, I'll see you soon. Until then, take it easy.